NASA's mission is to explore the unknown.
There's more that we don't know than we do know. That's just the nature of the universe.
In the search for answers, it launches its scientists into space, its craft beyond the limits of the solar system.
Taking risks is part of making discoveries. Space exploration is like lighting a match, and we don't know what lurks in the shadows.
Hey, what is that?
There could be anything out there.
Neil Armstrong faces a fight for survival.
Without making the right decision within a few seconds, they were going to die.
A skydiver survives a dangerous close encounter.
It's some sort of extraterrestrial object that's falling down into the Earth's atmosphere.
And declassified documents reveal plans for a U.S. military base on the moon.
It sounds crazy, but it's there in black and white.
NASA's missions have uncovered disturbing anomalies.
Okay, we're seeing 3 or 4 objects. There are 3 objects.
That continue to perplex our finest scientific minds. These are NASA's Unexplained Files. 200 miles above Earth, a Gemini spacecraft lurches out of control.
They have no idea what they're about to go through.
The spacecraft was literally beginning to tumble.
What should be a routine mission becomes a near-death experience for the most famous astronaut of all time.
It's getting worse and worse. It's like the fairground ride from hell.
Within minutes, Gemini 8 will transform from a perfect mission to a struggle for survival.
March 1966. Astronauts Neil Armstrong and Dave Scott take a vital step in the race to the moon.
Gemini 8 was designed to practice one of the procedures that would be needed to go to the moon, and that was to dock in space.
The target for the docking maneuver is an unmanned Agena rocket booster.
This is the first time spacecraft will actually dock together.
Armstrong and Scott are both rookie astronauts, and the missions take them into uncharted territory for spaceflight.
The Gemini spacecraft and the Agena are both traveling at over 17,000 miles an hour.
That's 300 miles a minute, 5 miles a second. And you're not sure where you are because the rocket never puts you precisely where you're aiming.
The future of the U.S. space program hangs on the success of this mission.
There's nothing automatic about making a docking.
One wrong maneuver, and these two spacecraft could crash together. That's catastrophic.
You can do a very, very tiny little maneuver. You don't make any big moves.
They push on in, put the nose into the collar on the Agena, and latch.
Initially, it appears the mission is going like clockwork.
Inside the cabin of Gemini 8, Neil Armstrong turned to Dave Scott and he said, "It's easy."
Historic moment has passed. Mission control cheers.
But it's the calm before the storm.
Shortly after docking, Armstrong and Scott lose contact with mission control.
They do their last radio check with mission control, and everything seems A-OK. They have no idea what they're about to go through.
Just minutes later, Dave Scott makes a shocking discovery.
Dave happens to glance at a particular instrument on the control panel, and he said to Neil, he said, "We're in a bank."
They weren't flying level anymore. For some reason, they were dipped.
The spacecraft was literally beginning to tumble.
Within minutes, Gemini 8 will transform from a perfect mission to a struggle for survival.
Cut off from mission control, Armstrong and Scott have to figure out why they have started to roll by themselves.
Their first thought would be, it must be that unmanned thing we docked with. Our spacecraft has been working great since launch.
They've got to separate the two spacecraft. Both of them are spinning fast. If they so much as touch during the undocking maneuver, the impact will destroy both of them.
Armstrong initiates the emergency undocking procedure.
Neil said to Dave, "Are you ready? Push on dock."
They backed away from the Agena, but to their horror, the roll rate increased.
Instead of correcting the Gemini spacecraft's roll, undocking from the booster accelerates it into a violent spin.
They were spinning in all directions, and they didn't know why.
The situation is perilous. They made it up to 60 revolutions a minute.
It's spinning about once per second, like being inside a washing machine.
This thing is going crazy on it.
What looked like a routine mission has become a fight for survival.
The spin rate just keeps getting faster and faster and faster. They will lose consciousness.
If you black out, you can't control your craft. You're lost in orbit.
They will have nothing to stop the spacecraft from spinning completely until it breaks apart.
Scott and Armstrong use muscle tensing techniques to resist the effects of G-forces on their bodies, but the spin is more intense than anything they've trained for.
They're spinning so fast that they're beginning to lose their vision.
Dave Scott sees his vision has begun to close in from the G-forces.
Disoriented and struggling to see, Armstrong reasons the Gemini's maneuvering thrusters might be causing the spin. He decides to shut them down.
It's a situation in which you can't count on your brain working right, and you can't count on your hand working right.
You know where all the switches are. Getting to them could be a problem.
Armstrong has to, by memory and touch, figure out which switches to throw.
You've got to be very careful to get the right switch.
Armstrong fights against the G-force to turn off the maneuvering thrusters, but the Gemini craft is still spinning.
Without making the right decision within a few seconds, they were going to die.
You got to stop that rotation.
He realizes they have one last shot at survival, the unused re-entry thrusters.
He knew the only thing he had was the re-entry control system. Maybe that would be strong enough to stop him. He's pure flying by the seat of his pants at that point.
If Armstrong can fire the re-entry thrusters in the opposite direction of the spin, he might be able to stop it.
The worst thing you can do is panic. You analyze the situation, and you take corrective action, and you do the best you can. If that doesn't work, you die.
Armstrong turns on these re-entry thrusters and begins very carefully to fire thrusters against the rotation of the Gemini, and it begins to work.
He gets the spin stopped, and he saves their lives, but it told them, never let down your guard because something can strike at any moment.
Firing the re-entry thrusters saves their lives, but it creates another problem.
He used up all of his fuel to stop the rotation, and then they had to come back to Earth.
Unfortunately, that's the end of the mission. They have to come home.
NASA's flight controller aborts the 3-day mission, and just over 10 hours after they launched, Armstrong and Scott splashed down in the Pacific, 500 miles off the coast of Japan.
They have escaped. They've cheated death. And the best feeling of all is when you open a hatch and you smell that South Pacific air for the first time.
NASA launches an urgent investigation into the cause of the near-fatal spin.
It's later found that one of the module's thrusters has basically malfunctioned and got stuck in the on position, meaning it continued to fire when it should have been switched off.
The crew didn't have indicator lights for thrusters on. No one had thought that the wires could short circuit in that way.
NASA's future missions corrected this deadly oversight, and 3 years later, Neil Armstrong becomes the first man on the moon.
Neil's a pretty cool guy. He doesn't get rattled. He was such the perfect guy to make that first landing.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Up next, NASA investigates a Scandinavian skydiver's close encounter.
It's some sort of extraterrestrial object.
I was just mind blown. That was fantastic. I was so certain that this was a meteorite.
Near-death experience, 12,000 feet up.
A few inches closer, that would have hit him.
Turns into a science mystery that goes viral.
Where did it come from, and how can it be going that fast?
NASA scientists look deep into space to grapple with the mysteries of the universe. Sometimes, the mysteries come to them. June 17th, 2012. High above the Norwegian countryside, skydiver Anders Helstrup is falling through the air at more than 100 miles per hour when he feels an unidentified object whip past him.
You're falling through the sky and something whizzes past you. That will really get your attention.
Back on Earth, Anders reviews the footage from his helmet cam to find out what almost hit him. It looks like a rock, but Anders struggles to identify where it could have come from. His first idea is that it could have fallen from the plane.
Maybe it was attached underneath to the undercarriage.
But no one saw anything fall out. The next theory is that someone threw it towards him.
Even if the plane had been just out of the frame, it would have been impossible for anyone to time the throw just right.
In search of answers, Anders reaches out to a NASA scientist based in Oslo, Hans Amundsen. Amundsen analyzes the footage frame by frame and comes to the astonishing conclusion the object is a meteorite, a rock falling from space.
I was mind blown. I thought this must be a meteorite. I was just, wow. It was like light gray on the clear, fresh surface, and then sort of darkish gray, black on the rounded surface, which is what a meteorite is supposed to look like when it breaks up.
Using the footage, Amundsen estimates the size of the meteorite. Anders is lucky to be alive.
We ended up with the rock being around the size of an orange or a grapefruit. And if that kind of rocket at 150 miles an hour hits you, you're dead.
Could Anders have just had his very own close encounter with a rock from outer space?
Meteorites usually arrive as a really bright, impressive fireball, sometimes associated with sonic booms and electrical cracklings.
But the object in the video is dull and dark. It looks nothing like a typical meteor.
Other people that saw this said, well, it's not glowing, it can't be a meteorite.
But Amundsen thinks this could be a meteor in the last stages of flight, when the glow stops.
The meteors you see in the sky that really glow, they come in at, maybe 5 times the speed of a rifle bullet. But then it hits the atmosphere. And that's the glowing you see, it's the friction. It puts on the brakes.
It's already slowed down in the atmosphere, so it's now simply falling. It's what we call dark flight.
A meteor in dark flight is just a rock dropping to Earth at about 200 to 300 miles per hour.
This would be the first time anyone has ever witnessed a meteor in dark flight. But not everyone buys Amundsen's theory.
NASA puts the odds of this happening at 1 in 500 billion. That makes it virtually impossible.
The only way for Amundsen to prove his theory is to find the meteorite. If it really is the grapefruit-sized rock their calculations suggest, it could be worth more than $1 million.
Meteorites are rare, and they're worth a lot of money.
This particular meteorite would have been the first one ever filmed during dark flight. It would be a celebrity, so if we found it, we thought it would be worth a lot.
For a whole year, teams of people scour an area of Norwegian countryside, not much bigger than a city block.
We tried everything. We searched in the river with, skydiving equipment. We searched with metal detectors. And we looked and we looked and we looked. And we found nothing.
Finally, the team decides to release the video to the wider public.
I think that footage had something like 5 million hits in a few days. You could follow the time zones as it went around the world. Everyone was trying to solve what this was.
One of the 5 million is NASA physicist Phil Metzger.
As soon as I read about it, I knew that the software that I had developed at NASA over the previous 10 years would be able to solve this.
Metzger's cutting-edge software is used during NASA's shuttle launches to determine the potential danger of any debris. It can calculate the flight path of airborne particles with incredible accuracy. He applies it to Anders' video evidence.
The team in Norway had calculated that it was about that big, which meant it was a significant rock. The software we used from NASA redid those calculations using a lot more details in the physics, and we were able to refine the estimate of the size of the particle.
The NASA software reveals the rock is much smaller than the Norwegian team had initially thought. It's about the size of a grape, not a grapefruit.
The next question was, could we explain the timing of it? Why did it happen to go by the skydiver right when it did?
Metzger looks at the skydiver's flight path for clues.
The skydiver was using a wingsuit, so he was flying horizontally like a bat. When the skydiver opened his parachute, that stopped his horizontal flight, and he began falling vertically.
The video shows that the rock flew past Anders 12 seconds after he opened his parachute.
According to our calculations, a rock that had come out of the parachute would have continued traveling horizontally until it slowed down, and then it would have fallen straight vertically and fallen right where the skydiver was.
The NASA software points to one conclusion. Anders' close encounter was not a rock from outer space. It was a piece of gravel from his own parachute.
It was released when the parachute opened, and because of the aerodynamic forces, it flew right past the camera.
I remember, when I found that, oh my God, everybody's going to think that me and everybody else working on this are totally just stupid idiots. But no.
The mathematics that the Norwegian team did was entirely correct. The only reason we were able to get a more accurate calculation is because NASA had spent 10 years developing this software.
So we went out in the end and said, okay, we were wrong. It's gravel. NASA solved it. And people were applauding. They thought it was great. Good science. You were wrong. You admitted it. Hey, this is cool.
Still to come, A declassified document reveals detailed plans to build a military base on the moon.
This was a place from which we might be able to bombard our enemies on Earth with nuclear weapons.
It sounds crazy, but the U.S. Army didn't think so.
An Apollo 17 photograph captures a strange triangle on the moon.
Suddenly, out of a dark space, you start to see what looks like a pyramid.
And recently declassified documents reveal U.S. military plans for a secret lunar construction project.
A military space program captured on camera.
It sounds crazy, but it's there in black and white.
NASA was founded as a civilian agency for the peaceful exploration of space. But the space agency's ties to the U.S. military have always been close. December 1972.
Okay, stand by for pitch over. So are we coming in?
The Apollo 17 lunar module touches down in an unexplored region of the moon known as the Taurus Littrow Valley.
Apollo 17 was the last manned mission to the moon. It was going into dark territory.
This has got to be one of the most proud moments of my life.
Geologist Harrison Schmitt is the first and to date only scientist to set foot on the lunar surface.
We were very aware that this was the last of the Apollo missions. We did an awful lot of taking pictures.
With 4 cameras, they captured thousands of images of a place never before seen by human eyes.
Based on the photography we had at the time, the Apollo photographs are really quite remarkable.
Some of the images they take become iconic. Others fade into obscurity for decades.
Every now and then, a photo shows up that really stands out as odd. This is one of them.
In 2008, amateur investigators uncover one image from Apollo 17 that seems blank. Until they look closer.
Suddenly, out of a dark space, you start to see what looks like a pyramid.
Image analyst Mark Antonio has studied the mystifying photograph.
Here's the faint outline that looks like the pyramid. Now, we can actually modify this photo, increase the contrast, and change some parameters. Now, we see this a little more clearly. Whatever is that?
We seem to have photographic evidence suggesting pyramidal structures on the moon.
How could there be artificial structures on the moon, and who or what would be capable of putting them there?
An intriguing explanation comes in July 2014, when the U.S. military declassifies a dossier of top-secret documents. One of them is a 118-page report called Project Horizon. It reveals a detailed plan to build a fortress on the moon.
This is one of the greatest Cold War stories that we've ever heard.
An official document showing intentions to put a military base on the moon.
The plan is the brainchild of a U.S. Army general, Arthur Trudeau. In 1959, he submits the document for Pentagon approval.
He says, imagine what it would be like for us in the United States if the Soviet Union military could rain missiles down on the United States from the moon. No, this cannot be. We must fortify the moon first.
We've got a U.S. Army document saying that the establishment of a lunar base should be as much of a priority as the Manhattan Project was during World War II. That's incredible. When the U.S. military makes something a priority like they did with Manhattan Project, there's really nothing they can't do.
Trudeau writes that it can be done in just 7 years.
The conclusion says that the United States can establish an operational lunar outpost by 1966. They have to ask, how far did this project go?
Officially, the Senate refuses to fund Trudeau's ambitious plan.
What we know, or believe we know, is that Project Horizon was shelved. It never happened. What if that's not true?
At the same time that NASA is flying its final missions to the moon, the U.S. military is building highly classified pyramid structures on Earth. The Nakoma missile site in North Dakota was home to 46 nuclear warheads. Could this technology be transplanted to the moon?
It's right there in black and white. There are no known technical barriers to the establishment of a manned base on the moon.
A secret military moon base could have offered a decisive advantage in the Cold War.
The idea of putting a base on the moon would make sense. It's a very typically military idea, a place from which we might be able to bombard our enemies on Earth with nuclear weapons.
The declassified documents provide a compelling vision of a military moon base, but detailed analysis of the Apollo 17 picture refutes the idea that the base ever got beyond the planning stage. The pyramid photograph is one of a series of photos taken consecutively.
If we look at others in the sequence, we also see shapes like this. Here's a square piece right there.
Seen in context, there is only one conclusion.
This is a piece of the lunar rover.
The pyramid appears to be just a dark shadow across the seat of the rover.
With Apollo 17, we had to deploy the lunar rover. We drove for a total of about 32 kilometers.
These are all part of the same sequence. One is just a badly taken, underexposed photo.
The Project Horizon base never became a reality, but NASA has not given up on the idea of a permanent presence on the moon.
This is something we can do. We know we can do it. It's just a matter of when. NASA commissioned a new study in July 2015 to look at the feasibility of establishing a permanent lunar outpost. What they found is that, best case, the outpost wouldn't be finished until 2030. So we're a long way off.
Coming up, NASA astronauts discover a life form that has taken over a Russian space station.
Once it starts, it may mutate, it may grow fast, and it may become impossible to stop.
A NASA astronaut finds a space station overrun with life forms that threaten the entire space program.
There are things growing all over the space station. It's out of control and nobody knows why.
January 15th, 1998. NASA astronaut Dave Wolf is on board Russia's Mir space station. He's collecting environmental samples to check for bacteria and parasites.
NASA is starting to build its own space station, and they need to know if microorganisms pose a threat to the astronauts. So they look to see what's happening on the Mir space station, but have no idea what's in store for them.
When the crew opens a rarely used service panel, what they find is terrifying.
They find a huge globule, essentially, of water that's just teeming with organisms.
If you open up a service hatch and are confronted with a basketball-sized lump of living thing, it would freak you out.
The crew discovers that the situation is worse than anyone had imagined possible.
They find living organisms everywhere, on the window gaskets, on the cable bundles, on the pipes, in every nook and cranny they find something alive.
This rare Russian footage, shot aboard the Mir, shows the frightening extent of the infestation.
Somehow, the space station has become a veritable zoo of microorganisms.
The profusion of life forms on the space station poses a threat to the astronauts. U.S. and Russian scientists struggle to explain how Mir was taken over so quickly.
What's causing this increased acceleration of the growth? You know, it almost seems like there's some sort of outside influence or something unknown that's causing this.
Scientists point to the Mir's long history of technical problems.
Mir suffered power outages and had huge problems with air temperature and humidity, both factors that would help things grow. But it still doesn't explain just what we're seeing here.
NASA needs to understand what's happening on Mir.
Microorganisms can actually damage and corrode certain materials and wires. Unchecked and uncontrolled bacterial growth on a space mission can compromise the entire program.
12 years later, a NASA experiment provides a clue to the cause of Mir's infestation. In May 2010, the Space Shuttle Atlantis carries an experiment called Micro 2 to the International Space Station. An identical experiment will be carried out simultaneously on Earth. The twin experiments both grow samples of identical disease cells. The results are astonishing. The cells in space grow faster and bigger than the ones on Earth. This could help explain Mir's outbreak.
You'd think that if you took these microorganisms away from their natural habitat, that they'd just wither and die. That's what you'd think would happen, but you'd be wrong.
The organism's rapid and unexpected growth means that if they were to escape into the ISS, they would pose an imminent threat to everyone on board.
When considering prolonged manned space missions, the threat of a microorganism causing disease becomes all that more concerning.
Humans are at their most vulnerable in space. Our immune systems shut down when we leave our natural environment.
If the organism is more lethal and the astronaut becomes compromised in his or her immune response, this is a perfect storm and recipe for a disastrous mission.
But the greatest threat the organisms pose is not to the astronauts, it is to us.
One of our major concerns has always been the possibility of bringing that modified hypervirulent organism back to Earth and having that actually cause disease here.
It's like something out of the Andromeda strain. A bacteria arrives from space and our immune systems are completely unable to handle it and we are wiped out.
To date, NASA has yet to find a way to prevent the shutdown of the human immune system during space travel. Research is ongoing. Up next, a NASA probe finds bizarre, multi-layered oceans beneath the surface of one of Jupiter's moons.
Whenever you discover water on another planet, the first thing you think of is life.
Creatures with very sharp teeth and wide eyes beaming down and bam!
A spacecraft surveying an icy moon of Jupiter makes a shocking discovery.
An entire world covered with ice, but it's only the beginning.
Something is stirring beneath the frozen surface of the world we call Ganymede.
Long, ribbon-like creatures, predators coming right up behind them and snap.
June 1996. NASA's Galileo spacecraft is 6 months into its exploration of the Jupiter system. As it passes Jupiter, its electronic gaze turns to one of the gas giant's ice-covered moons, Ganymede. The probe's magnetic readings reveal something totally unexpected.
An entire world covered with ice, but underneath that ice, an ocean.
That ocean contains more water than the Pacific, despite the fact that Ganymede is smaller than the Earth.
The discovery raises excitement among scientists worldwide.
Whenever you discover water on another planet, the first thing you think of is life.
How could there not be extensive life in that big ocean?
But if life exists in the depths of Ganymede's seas, it faces many challenges.
Ganymede has oceans, but they're not like the oceans on Earth.
Perhaps the greatest challenge life there would face is the thick ice that covers the water.
Ganymede's a different world. If we imagine the habitat on Ganymede, it's going to be a thick layer of ice. Too much ice at the top for sunlight to get down.
Pitch black, there's no sunlight. It's freezing cold and there's no oxygen. How can life possibly thrive?
For nearly 20 years after the Galileo probe's first scans, scientists believe Ganymede cannot support life. Then, in 2014, an astonishing discovery in Antarctica changes everything. Microbiologist Jill McCookie is exploring what is perhaps the most bizarre feature of the frozen landscape. A place called Blood Falls.
You're on this craggy, crazy ice cover, and then it takes your breath away.
Jill discovers that the falls hold a dark secret.
This unique little feature of Blood Falls was really a window into a subsurface world that was much deeper and that we couldn't see at the surface.
Scientists discovered liquid water buried beneath the ice.
The subsurface oceans are deep beneath the glacier, where there is no sunlight and temperatures are deadly cold. Analysis of samples from the icy ocean reveals something shocking.
I looked at the samples under the microscope and there were cells there. Whole little world just in this drop of brine.
Even though it's pitch black, there's no sunlight, there's no oxygen, and it's freezing cold, they found 17 different kinds of microbe living in this extreme environment.
The discovery prompts scientists to question how life can exist in such extreme conditions.
At Blood Falls in Antarctica, living things have found another way of sustaining themselves. They use minerals, sulfates, to react with iron, and it's that iron that produces this blood-red colour. And they essentially feed themselves on minerals.
The revelation that life can exist with no obvious food source in a dark ocean buried beneath the ice has stunning implications for Ganymede.
So what we're asking ourselves is could these oceans on Ganymede be full of microbes, just like at Blood Falls?
Maybe because I study life in Antarctica, I'm more of an optimist about the ability of life to survive harsh conditions.
Surprisingly, Ganymede's deepest waters offer the best hope for finding life.
This is a world that has oceans in layers. It has ice, water, ice, water, ice, water. It looks like a striped cake.
To have life, you really want rocks and water together, because they produce the elements that living things need.
where you want to look for life is going to be in that last ocean level because it's in contact with rock. So if we're looking for life on Ganymede, we're going all the way to the bottom.
With all the elements necessary for life present, there is good reason to hope that the ice water of Ganymede could be home to more than just microbes.
We could go to Ganymede expecting only simple life, but I think we should keep our eyes open just in case there's something more interesting as well.
It's had 4.5 billion years to evolve. There could be long, ribbon-like creatures, 30 meters long, 2 meters wide, moving across the bottom. Predators coming right up behind him, sensing these trails moving, and snap.
Whatever form life takes on Ganymede, we could encounter it within the next decade.
So the next step is the JUICE mission, which is specifically designed to go and study those oceans of the icy moons of Jupiter.
The truth is, there could be no limit to the life that lives on Ganymede. It's really up to us to go investigate and find out.
Still to come, cameras on the International Space Station capture a laser beam striking dangerously close.
It looks a little like a Star Wars death ray.
If this is true, then science fiction would become overnight science fact.
The cameras on the International Space Station reveal an energy beam streaking down towards Earth.
Looks like somebody fired phasers.
The images cause global excitement.
Where does the beam hit? What's the target?
December 5th, 2014. The crew of the International Space Station is conducting an experiment to study the behavior of fire in microgravity. But something else is about to capture the world's attention. Thousands of people watching the live video feed from the ISS see something extraordinary happening outside the space station. Something that looks like a laser beam fires into space.
This is like something out of the movies.
The remarkable footage poses a number of questions.
Where does the beam hit? What's the target?
NASA does not comment on the unusual phenomenon.
Of course it goes viral on the internet. It's on Facebook, it's on YouTube, and everyone has their own idea of what's going on here.
Some observers speculate that the footage could show space weaponry in action.
You see something that looks like a laser beam, so it's natural to ask, is this some sort of weapon?
The ISS is home to one of the world's most advanced scientific laboratories. It was built to serve peaceful purposes.
Advances in pure science and advances in military technology often go hand in hand. And of course, the major powers are always trying to push the frontiers of science to try to gain a military edge over each other.
If the energy beam from the ISS was a test of space weaponry, it would not be the first. During the Cold War, the Reagan administration launched an ambitious scheme called the Strategic Defense Initiative, better known as Star Wars.
There were ideas about putting lasers in space to defend against incoming nuclear warheads.
In tests, standard optical lasers successfully shot down incoming missiles, but could only intercept one missile at a time. The next step was a more advanced laser using X-rays. The laser focused beams of X-ray radiation from a thermonuclear warhead, shooting them in multiple directions to obliterate multiple targets. The system had the potential to neutralize the entire Soviet nuclear arsenal.
There are a lot of ways that space can feature weapons of one sort or another.
But while space weaponry has been with us for decades, defense experts point out that the ISS is not a suitable location for weapons testing.
If you were going to test a space laser weapon from Earth, why in the world would you aim it at or near the International Space Station, which has cameras running all the time and thereby reveal what you're doing?
After days of speculation, NASA releases a statement explaining that the beam everyone saw was a laser. But it's not a weapon. It's part of an advanced communication system developed by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California. Its codename, Opals.
Right now, primarily, we communicate with our spacecraft using radio waves. But, you know, just like the internet has grown, we started off with dial-up and now we have broadband. We want to do the same thing with our spacecraft. The way you encode information is you encode it on a wave. Radio waves are quite large. Light waves, however, are much, much smaller. And therefore, you can encode far more information on them. So light waves have the potential for encoding far more information.
The Opal system can send more data at higher speeds, which allows for the transmission of HD video.
In the first successful test of the Opal system, the space station sent down a video that said, "Hello, world." Using traditional radio waves, that video would have taken 10 minutes to downlink. But using Opals, it took just 3.5 seconds.
The explanation calms fears that we could be entering an era of space warfare and opens exciting possibilities for the future of space exploration.
This is a big deal. With this type of technology, we'll be able to communicate vast amounts of information with deep space missions and be able to communicate much more information much more rapidly. This is a game changer.
Mankind's first hesitant steps into space are fraught with many dangers. And there are things in the darkness which may yet pose a threat to us all. In the space above our heads, the dreams of science fiction become reality. And with each new discovery, it becomes clearer we have only begun to scratch the surface of what may be out there.